Good Sunday morning, everyone. This is the DK Garage. I'm Jeremy. That is Joe. And this is part 2 of Pocono's Race Day Rundown. Joe, how was your Saturday?
Saturday was eventful. We had some ups and downs, some very wild ending to the race with Kyle Larson blowing a tire on the last turn practically and giving a win to Alex Bowman. Would have done a little bit better if Larson would have taken home in the win, but I had enough exposure elsewhere to have a decent day. I ended up in plus money. How about yourself?
You know, it was a much better race than I anticipated. Poconos, typically the last few years, as I mentioned in one of our episodes or the podcast, not always the best race. This one had so much fuel strategy. I know we'll see a lot of that again today. Slightly longer, so maybe a little bit more fuel strategy comes into play. Just strategy all over. Things got shooken up like throughout the whole race. People that we were high on did really good. People we were low on did bad. And then we were off on a few of them. That's NASCAR. All in all, it was a fun day, great race. Not the best for DraftKings, but hey, we get a chance to recoup it today.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to see how things shape up. This is a doubleheader, so the impact of Kyle Larson not winning. We talked about mechanical issues being a part of NASCAR in our previous podcast episode. You can check that out above. We talked a lot of strategy involved in Pocono overall, who has a lot of good data here. So make sure you check that out if you have the time. But we're on to the second race here. It's 350 miles, a little bit longer than yesterday's race. The number of laps is 140. Same place, so we're looking at 2.5 mile tricky triangle, and the potential performance points available are at 98, so we have 7 more points than that were available on Saturday's race. And obviously Alex Bowman won. The stages are very similar. We've got 30 in the first stage, 55 and 55 in the second and third stage, so we'll get that dialed in. Obviously, the starting grid is where things are going to be a little bit different. We've got the top 20 inverted from yesterday's race, so we have Chris Buescher on the top of the starting grid, and then 21st through the 38th position is basically where they finish. So it was a benefit for those who had a strong run yesterday. Here we are.
Yeah, I mean, this starting grid is all jumbled up, just like it was for the second race last year. Same way they inverted it. And the optimal reflects that. You don't see anyone in the second Pocono race, essentially, with the highest starting grid was 18th. Everyone else was lower than that. You don't normally see that unless we're at a super speedway race. I think we're going to see a very similar strategy in this race. But there may be a few guys who are starting up front who might find their way in there. We'll get to them in a minute. Yeah, it's going to be a fun one watching some of these guys who are really fast make their way through the field. And some of these guys who had to go to backup cars, what do they do? What do those teams do? That's going to be really important. Strategy, just like the race yesterday was important. This is very similar, just different strategy.
Yeah, and make sure you check out our race guide. It is available for download in the description below. It is refreshed. We've got it available for this second race, so we have indicated who is going to the rear in that digital magazine, basically, is what it is. And then we also include some really good data points, including that optimal lineup from last year, so you can see how impactful the strategy is this week. Especially for this second race. And then also there's a lot more data that's available there with the, let's say, the driver pool. That's a big thing that we've put together too in a couple core builds. So basically, let's get this thing started, man. Yep. Kyle Larson's at the top of the salary board. $12,800 is his starting price, and he's starting 12th. We're going to go ahead and give you our impact scores like we do every week. Scale of 1 to 10, 1 being not as impactful on the race in our opinion, and 10 being somebody we think is a major part of this race in the DraftKings environment. So I've given Kyle Larson a 7, I think, based on his starting position and how we saw everybody's strategy kind of play into this. It's going to be hard for him, in my opinion, to pay off that huge price tag. He's even more priced up than he was for yesterday's race.
Yeah, it's fun because, again, when we do these scores, we don't do them together. So this is kind of my first time seeing your scores, and I was interested to see what you do with Larson. And I think we had the same idea. If Larson wins the race, he doesn't blow the tire out, he starts 20th, and he's a 10 for sure. You're playing him. But he's only getting credited with the 12th starting spot because he finished 9th, and he's going to the backup car, which means he's starting at the rear. I still think he can race his way up to the front. I still think he could potentially win this race. I think that backup car will still be good. The problem is I have a feeling it'll take him a while to get there, and you're going to need him to lead as many laps as possible to pay off that salary. I think he can do it, but there's a lot of plays that I like more besides Larson. So that's why you're going to see this is probably the lowest score we've given Larson in like 5 or 6 weeks.
And you mentioned he's going to the rear because of that. We saw Chase Elliott in this race earlier. He started in the rear, and he ended up with damage almost immediately. So it is something to pay attention to. These guys go to the rear, especially him.
It was on the initial start.
Yeah, having that starting position of 12th, that's really impactful on this race. Kyle Busch is the next guy on the salary board, starting 19th. He's 11,000. He looks strong. I've given him a 9 because I think he's shown that he was able to really be able to get around the racetrack. He understands that his competition, if he can keep him behind him this time, and he's got the place differential to even make it more impactful position from a DraftKings angle, I'm excited to have him on in my roster this week.
Yeah, you got to like Kyle Busch. I know they'll make some adjustments on that car. It wasn't quite where he needed it at the end of the race, but he led 30 laps. He had 17 fastest laps. He had the highest driver rating overall, above Kyle Larson. Larson probably finishes higher than him, obviously, if that tire issue didn't happen. But either way, it was really the Kyle and Kyle show. Kind of from the stats standpoint, with him not having to go to the backup car, at least nothing yet, and no word on it if anybody's going to have to go to the rear for unapproved adjustments. So if everything holds serve, him starting 19th, his path to value is not that difficult if he can have a similar run like he had in yesterday's race.
I agree. That's why I've given him a 9. I think he's just got an easier path than some of these guys, and look at that discount compared to Kyle Larson.
$1,800, yeah.
Martin Truex is next, 10,800. He's starting 3rd. I've given him a score of a 6. He looked at points to be a little bit stronger than we'd seen him in previous weeks. It's just concerning he didn't have a super strong finish to the race. Obviously, he's starting 3rd. I could see him maybe getting out and getting some quick laps led strategy, and some of that might play into the mix, and he could have a strong impact on the race, but I just don't see it. I thought there were a lot more drivers, especially we need place differential, and for that price tag, I'm not really wanting to start building my lineups with Martin Truex in this race.
Yeah, I'm hesitant as well, but I have to give him a 7 because he does have a win, and his stats aren't that bad here. If you're not obviously considering what he did yesterday, in the garage thoughts, there's the previous 6. Now would be considered the 2018 to 2020 stats. He's pretty solid. I believe he was like the 4th highest or 5th highest rated driver according to driver rating. So he could get it done. He could be one of those guys that I mentioned that maybe does break the mold in this race, and he's not the PD that you need. Maybe the team is able to make the adjustments. I think if you're looking to get a little different than some of these drivers up top, Martin Truex is a top-tier talent and top-tier equipment. I don't expect him to be that guy, but the fact that he has that going for him and he has good stats here, I think he could be a good pivot, so I'm going to give him a 7.
The next guy is his teammate and the teammate of Kyle Busch. We've got 3 Gibbs gentlemen here in a row. Denny Hamlin, 10.5, starting 17th. I've given him a score of a 9. He looks strong at times. He obviously finished in the top 5. We're talking about him starting 17th with the invert. We're going to look at him as somebody that has the place differential upside that we're looking for. I've got him right there as one of these guys that we need to start building our lineups around, built on that place differential.
I wanted to give Hamlin a 10 because I thought that they were pretty strong most of the day. I think, again, they'll be a team that makes the right adjustments. He seems to do better in the second Pocono race. He won the second Pocono race last year, and I believe he won the second Pocono race in 2019. I think they'll get this thing done. The problem is I think Kyle Busch, with the 2 extra PD upside that he offers and what seemed to be a little bit faster car, that's where I have to kind of draw the line and say Busch is probably a little bit better. But I think Hamlin is a strong play for me. Will be in a good portion of my lineups for sure.
Chase Elliott, 10-2, starting 9th, is the second Hendrick car we get to talk about. He ended up finishing fairly strong based on what happened throughout the race. I've given him a score of 6. We differ here pretty drastically. I'm seeing his teammates below him as potentially better options to reach value. So I'm hesitant on wanting to build very many Chase Elliott lineups for this second bout. How about you?
Well, you had to give him an 8 because he is another guy who has had some really good runs here. We saw how good his teammates were. Larson almost won. He probably should have won, obviously. Bowman won, and Byron was up there. He led a good portion of the laps. I think Chase would have had a much better day if he doesn't have that damage early on. They had so many pit stops early on. They couldn't really take advantage of the fuel strategy. They're starting up front. Best indication is they're going to stay up there. They're not going to the rear. That's a pretty solid car around some other guys who maybe aren't running quite as strong this year. Maybe he can kind of maintain that track position. And again, maybe because he doesn't look as good as some of these other drivers around him, maybe he goes a little under-owned. That's why I had to give him an 8.
And another reason I gave him a 6, you can go check out our podcast because there's a lot of not very well supporting data for him in the 550 package, which we're running again for the second event. So I pointed that out there. Kevin Harvick starting 13th is $10,000. He's in an interesting spot. I've given him a 7. I think he's playable. He looked really strong at times. Strategy, they might get it right this time. It might be an opportunity to get Kevin Harvick and them pulling out a win this week after learning a little bit more today.
Yeah, I would have loved to get Harvick a little cheaper. I think it is going to be a little difficult with some of these guys around him and above him. But I think he has to be considered. If you're only doing maybe 1 or 2 lineups, maybe you take the risk on it. But if you're building multiple, you're going to want to find ways to get Harvick around some of these other good drivers. And, hey, maybe he doesn't lead a lot of laps, but he doesn't really need to. If he just needs a good, solid run. Certainly capable of doing it. I'm going to give him a 7 as well.
Joey Logano, 9,700, starting 14th. He looked strong at times, led quite a few laps, and is somebody that could have an impact being that he has some place differential upside. I've given him a 7 as well. I think him and Harvick are in very similar situations, so you can basically pick and choose who you put in your lineup in this position.
Logano really surprised me. I mean, he was our red flag, and he did much better than we thought. But he's had some good runs. I think they said he won in like 2011 here, so he can definitely scoot around this track. Penske as a whole, I thought, did much better. Ryan Blaney, we liked him a lot, obviously, and he did really good. Had a really strong finish. Maybe Penske's kind of got this figured out a little bit. Now you get him with some PD upside. I think Logano is really playable here, and I'm going to give him a 7.
All right, we've got his teammates next. Brad Keselowski, 9,500, starting 11th, and then Ryan Blaney, 9,200, starting 16th. We are differing on Brad Keselowski for sure. I've given him a 5, and I just didn't see a whole lot, and with this price tag, there's so much more value to be had. I don't know if I really want much, if any, exposure to Brad Keselowski. Ryan Blaney, his teammates right there, we just got done talking about Penske's speed and how they've looked a little bit better yesterday. He's 9,200, starting 16th. I've given him a score of 8. I think he's a lot more of a value play than Brad Keselowski. He's got a little bit more place differential upside and just looked stronger today or yesterday.
You act like we're way off on Brad. I gave him a 6, and that's just because, I think they can make some adjustments. but it's not like I'm high on Brad either. I gave Blaney an 8. Much more on Logano and Blaney, but Brad is still one of those guys where he's still a good driver. He looked decent at times. The problem was he had damage early on. He was the reason why Cole Custer wrecked quite a few of my lineups, and I'm sure a lot of other people's as well. So he has some damage. Don't know how bad that's going to be. Don't know if they're going to ultimately have to go to a different car. But if he can stay there and they can make the right adjustments, he could be lower owned. People won't be impressed with them. You kind of have to consider that a little bit because Penske did look better. That's why I'm going to be one higher than you at 6.
William Byron, 9,000, starting 18th, looked pretty strong today or yesterday. I'm thinking that he's somebody today that will be impactful on the race for sure. That's why I've given him a 9. He's looked very strong in every package at every style of track, and it was no different. So I think he's somebody that, with that place differential, is somebody you really have to look at.
Was one of the best drivers early on and really didn't drift back too much most of the race. He was really strong. I gave him a 9. I really wanted to kind of give him that 10, but he is going to be starting back there with a lot of other good guys, a lot of other opportunities to have something go wrong. But there's really not much bad to say about that 24 team or his teammate Alex Bowman, who starts 2 spots behind him at 20th. They only marked him at 8,700 for this second race. Really got to like that. Even though he didn't look good early on, I think he said it in his post race. He was like, we weren't really good. I don't really know how we ended up with this win, but here we are. That's not a high price tag for that kind of a car. Starting 20th, I got to give him a 9 as well as Byron.
Yeah, I've given Bowman an 8. I think he's right there with Byron, and Byron just looked stronger, in my opinion, throughout the entirety of the race, and Bowman was in the right position with the strategy, and it could play out just the same tomorrow, but I don't think it does. The same thing, it happened every single time you look at it like that. It's what happened today or yesterday versus tomorrow. You don't know. It's NASCAR. It has mechanics. So I'm thinking that William Byron just has looked more consistent than him. So I think he has a little bit more upside, in my opinion.
Yeah, don't disagree. I think both are solid plays, and I think you could play them both in the same lineup and probably do very, very well.
Kurt Busch, 8,500, starting 15th. I've given him an impact score of 8. He looked strong and is somebody that has had his ups and downs, so we can see if he can put together back-to-back races. He needs it for the playoffs. He's had an opportunity to do it the last couple of races, so I think he's in a decent position to potentially reach value starting 15th.
Yeah, he looked good, and he was able to get up there and be competitive. But the thing is he also had some good strategy, some good pit strategy, fuel strategy, and he also caught some breaks with some timely cautions. I think that they can duplicate what they did yesterday. I got to give them an 8. I have to respect it, but there is still that hesitancy, like, again, starting further back, get a little damage early, can't play the same strategy. Got to be a little cautious, but if he's able to be as fast as he was in the last race, watch out for Kurt Busch.
Christopher Bell, 8,300, starting 4th. I've given him an impact score of 5. We both actually landed on a 5, which was interesting to see. I just didn't see a whole lot in yesterday's race, and I think the lack of 550 data, which we talked about in the podcast, kind of, I guess, came to light. I don't want too much exposure to him, especially with some guys below him that have a lot more place differential to offer.
Well, the thing that I think is a little challenging with Christopher Bell, so when I give him a 5, I think he has – it's really kind of it could go really well, it could go bad. The thing with him is he was on a pretty good pit strategy, and he just I don't know if they just waited one lap too late, or he just was a little slow in the pits, or what exactly happened, but he ended up pitting, I think, late in the stage and went a lap down. He got the free pass, so he was able to still maintain a decent day, but he was going to be up starting towards the front when that next pit cycle sequenced, so he got burned there. So I think it's a little that the results may be a little skewed because of that. If he doesn't have that happen, maybe he has a much better day. I think Bell is playable. I think he will be pretty low owned, but I definitely don't love playing him because it is risky.
Matty D, 8,100, starting 32nd. I've given him a score of 8 because that 32nd place really wasn't indicative of what he had going on. He had a couple issues on pit road, and they compounded themselves when he got speeding penalties, and it just continues to not look very bright for that team. But starting 32nd, then he has all the upside in the world this go around. I like him. I want some exposure. I had a lot of exposure in the first race. It kind of bit me, but
same here.
You have to adapt and overcome, and this is where we're at today. I think I'm going to have a decent bit of exposure again.
It's hard to say exactly where Matty D really stacked up because of all those issues, and they happened to semi-early, but he did start like 21st, and I think I saw him on the ticker board up to around the top 10. Some of that could have been strategy. I don't remember exactly what point in the race that I saw it. I know it was obviously had to be semi-early. So the fact that you're getting him starting 32nd, for sure he's not a must play, but as long as they don't have the penalties and pits again, which I think he can clean that up, that's a strong play for only $8,100. And there's a couple other good guys down here, but I think he's definitely up there this week or this race.
Chase Briscoe, 7,900, starting 24th. I've given him an impact score of 5. I just think there's some other drivers that are a little bit more consistent and showed a little bit more speed in yesterday's race that will allow for better place differential and a path to value easier than Chase Briscoe. That's why I landed on a 5.
I'm going to give him a 6 because I think he can do a little bit better. They can make some tweaks with their strategy. But ultimately, a 6 is not that great of a score for someone who is $7,900. And the guy below him, I think, is a much, much better play. We both have him rated at a 9, and that's Ross Chastain. He's starting 33rd. He will obviously be going to the rear because he's getting a new car. But at $7,700, starting 33rd, he was up there towards the front legitimately in the race yesterday. I think there's a lot to like about Chastain in this race.
I agree that he offers the place differential. The only downside potential is that he is going to a backup car. Hopefully they have consistent speed throughout their program, and he is able to get a similar performance as he did in the first race, and we'll see what it ends up. But Chris Buescher, 7,400, starting first, is somebody we liked a lot as a sleeper in the first race. This second race, though, starting on the pole, he doesn't offer a lot of upside. I've given him an impact score of 4.
It was funny. We both ended up at a 4. I think he can get out front. He can lead laps. Track position is huge here. We've mentioned it several times throughout this whole weekend. But he's starting first, and he more than likely is not going to finish inside the top 5. That makes it really risky. You can risk it for the biscuit with him, and I would understand, but I mean, he's finished 20th. There's a reason why he's starting first. Got to be at a 4 with him. And I don't know if you feel the same way, but I feel like the next two guys on the list, Daniel Suarez, Tyler Reddick, are very, very similar plays. 7,100 starting 8th for Suarez, and 6,900 starting 10th for Reddick. I'm at a 5 for Suarez and a 6 on Reddick. Where are you landing on those two guys?
I've given them both a 5. I think we pretty much see them very similarly. They don't offer a lot of upside. They can have an impact on the race, but it's very unlikely. And with their price points, I just see a lot more other ways to go construct the lineup.
A guy that I think you're going to have to construct your lineups with is Cole Custer, who is next on the board at 6,800. He was one of the first cars out, starting 38th in this race. I don't like playing Custer at this point in his career very much, but I think this is one of those times you're probably going to have to do it. He will help open up the higher end of the salary board for you. He's much better than a 38th place car if he finishes the race. I have to give him an 8 in this one.
Yeah, absolutely. He has to be one of the core people that you build around. He will be one of the core drivers that you look to have place differential built around. He has one of the easiest paths to value, 6,800. I've given him an impact score of 8 as well. The next two guys, Austin Dillon and Eric Almirola, they're in interesting positions in their own right. And Austin Dillon's 6,600 starting 21st. I don't see a lot of upside there. I've given him an impact score of 5. You've gone to a 7. You want to let me know why you're looking at Austin Dillon for race number 2? Because I didn't see too much there for race number 1.
Well, I guess you convinced me after your prediction for race 1. You were so high on Austin Dillon. I was like, well, he must be much better than this. There was times he was running good. They didn't really mention what happened. I don't know if it was some issues on pit road or what exactly happened, but he had raced his way up, and he was running up towards the front. I don't like this play a lot, but we are looking for some cheaper guys down here to help us out with our lineups. I think it's possible he gets a few positions higher, maybe worth it. So that's why I got to be at a 7. I am surprised that you only gave him a 5. But I guess that's the way it goes sometimes.
Yeah, I mentioned Eric Almirola starting 5th, 6,400. I've given him an impact score of 6. I like him a little bit more so than Austin Dillon because he is somebody that team as a whole looks like they have a little bit more speed. He's starting 5th. Even if he finishes 9th or so, he's almost there at 5X. I think that's an opportunity to potentially get somebody that has top 10 potential at a lower salary and has some upside. I don't want to have very much exposure, and I think it's definitely a GPP play, but somebody to look at.
Yeah, I'm at a 6 as well. I kind of see it the same way you do. It's risky because Almirola wasn't the best in this first race, but he does have good history here. As long as he didn't mess up the car too much, they can make those right adjustments. Someone who also kind of surprised me in this race was Bubba Wallace. He didn't get the finish where he was running, but he was running pretty good with some good, I'm guessing, some strategy. But I think he kind of raced his way up there. I'm going to be at a 4 because he's starting 7th and 6,200. But he could be one of those guys where you take a little risk on him. He will be in the DraftKings car, so I think he's worth at least one 25-cent lineup, if nothing else. But it is risky at that starting position. What do you see with Bubba this week?
We both landed on a 4 with him. It's very similar in my opinion. I don't think it's really worth the risk. And the guy below him, Ricky Stenhouse, 6,000, starting 6th, in my opinion, is even almost in a worse position. I've given him a score of a 3. You went a 4. I think we can agree they're
Same
almost
thing.
Identical. But Corey LaJoie starting 36, and he is $5,900, is somebody we both agree could be a great play. He looked strong at certain points, and when we say strong, for somebody that's in his equipment, he was running in the 20s. That's great whenever you're starting 36th.
I'm hoping they can have a solid backup car with them because he should finish much higher than 36, although we've said that at different times in this year. It hasn't always worked out that way. But you're right. He was running, I think, top 20 or right around that point when Alfredo just made a move on the outside and turned him. I thought it was going to completely end his day. He was able to keep it going. Not a good day for them on Saturday, but I think Sunday will be a much better day. And especially at $5,900, he doesn't need to do much for him to pay that off. And there's really only maybe one other guy below him that's worth the play. So I think LaJoie is top notch in this position.
Yeah, you mentioned the other guy. We got Justin Haley that's sandwiched in between Eric Jones. Justin Haley, somebody that we both have given a 3. We don't really think he's got much of an impact. But Eric Jones, starting 22nd, 5,700. I've given him a score of 7. You landed on a 6. He started 22nd, finished 22nd. My opinion is he learns a little bit, is able to communicate that to his team. They show up a little bit better, and they finish top 20. If he finished 18th, he's a 5X driver at that price tag.
Yeah, I gave him a 6 just because I was expecting more out of him on the first race, and it didn't quite happen. I think they can improve. Will they? You just don't really know what you're going to get with that 43. I think it's playable. 6 to me is still playable. That's still a decent score. I'm not expecting a whole lot out of him, but you don't need a whole lot. But I think the the guy that everyone's going to be trying to play down in this price range is Ryan Newman. He's 5,500 and he's starting 37th. He spun out on his own. Obviously, he's going to a backup car. Decent stats here at Pocono. You never know what you're going to completely get from a backup car, but I mean, these things are usually pretty good. I got to give Newman an 8 in this position.
I landed on the 8 as well. Starting 37th, he offers a great path to value at that price tag. He's got top 20 upside. Even if he finishes 25th, he is almost 5.5x, which is fantastic. You need some value. He's somebody that does that very easily. The guys below him, there really aren't very many guys to talk about because Ryan Preece would be in a decent spot, but he's going to a backup car, going to be starting in the rear. Anthony Alfredo starting 26 could be somebody to talk about too, but he will be starting in the rear. Both of those guys, it's just going to be hard to want to roster them as much as we would have in their positions.
Yeah, we would have rated both of them higher. I'm at a 4 on both of them. As we look down the list, there's really no one else. You could take a stab at it. You know, we haven't built these lineups yet. You're gonna want as many Kyle Busch type drivers, Hamlin, Logano, Harvick, Byron, Bowman, Blaney. You're gonna want these guys. They're all expensive. Maybe you take a chance on. I mean, we saw Cody Ware finish 25th. Don't play Cody Ware this time because I doubt he improves on that position. But maybe a guy like Belinky or maybe Half. I mean, I don't feel good about either of those.
Don't listen. He already said in the previous episode, don't play punt plays.
But I'm just saying, when the math works out, it works out because none of us expected Cody Ware to finish 25th. Strategy's weird here. You never know. But I'm not planning on playing any of them.
Yeah, and we have our open contest that is free and something that we put together every week. And if you want to be part of that, drop your DraftKings tag in the comments below. We want to invite you. I'll add you as a friend, and then you'll be on the weekly list that goes out. We want to grow this thing. We had a lot of competition this first race, so let's see if we can double it the second race. We definitely appreciate everybody that's been subscribing. It's been awesome to see the continued growth and support. Our Patreon membership has grown drastically as too, and we've got early memberships that are available there at a discounted rate, so make sure you go take advantage of that. But I am so excited to get double action this weekend. The race today is going to be fun, a little bit longer. Anything that you got that you're looking forward to? Anything to add before we wrap it up?
Well, while we get to build our lineups for the second Cup race of the weekend, we get to do it while watching the Xfinity race, which that should also be exciting. Truck race was pretty good yesterday. Just a jam-packed 2 days of NASCAR. It's a lot of fun. Looking forward to it. Yeah, that's really all I got, man.
Well, for the DK Garage, I'm Joe, that's Jeremy, and we'll see you next time.